Hello, this is Daniel Mart back again. I'm an actor and filmmaker based out of South Florida, and for this video, I'm going to be doing essentially this, ranking all the Final Destination deaths from 1 to 5. From Final Destinations 1 to number 5. So here we have all the tiers, S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and D tier, and then I have on top all the disasters, all the premonitions I'm going to have, and here are all the deaths. Now I did change a few details from this tier, from how it originally was. I changed the colors, I added the disaster category here on top. And I added Alex Browning here to the list because for whatever reason he's not featured here, so I need to put him on here to make it all, complete. So yeah, this is gonna be the tier list for the whole all 5 movies. Right now that the 6th one is coming out soon. Basically, I'm ready for it. Let's go watch it tomorrow on opening day. Can't wait. But this is what we have. So here they have it separated between the disasters or the films. So Flight 180, which is Final 1. Final 2 with the Pile Up, Roller Coaster for Final Destination 3, the Speedway with Final Destination 4, and the Bridge Collapse here with Final Destination 5. And actually, this should be in Final Destination 4. Let me just put you here. Yeah, start off here with the first disaster, Flight 180. I'm just going to put you there in the disaster category. I mean, that's where you go. Okay, cool. First off, Todd Wagner. This is the very first death in the series we get, of course, excluding Flight 180, which I'll discuss later. I mean, honestly, I do think Flight 180 is one of the better disasters we've had, but I'll go into it later once we have more disasters here. But yeah, now Todd Wagner, he's the first one that we get. And honestly, I think his death is one of the more unique ones because of the fact that you do have death here. He's like, yes, he's always there implementing, trying to figure out stuff, trying to make his Rube Goldberg, however that word is pronounced, Rube Goldberg, whatever. The one interesting thing here is the fact that here Death kind of hides the evidence. If you guys remember, the toilet leaks, and that's what forces Todd to slip and quote unquote hang himself, make it look like suicide. And we never really see that from Death ever again in the series, across the series, where he hides his doings, he hides the evidence. That's why they say it's a suicide, because they didn't see that the evidence that he would have slipped on a water, so to speak. They thought, oh no, he just committed suicide. And also for this being the first death in the series for us, for me that being an introduction to us to what we're about to get later on across the series, I do think it is a good death. I don't think it's the best death. I wouldn't put it in S tier, but I would put it in A tier. Also, Todd overall, I think is a likable character. He's there for the purpose he serves. Next up, Terry Chaney. So here's the funny thing, and I've heard this a lot. Apparently, people forget Todd Wagner is the first death in the series, and they just immediately go to Terry Chaney, so that just goes on to show how iconic this death is. Furthermore, it is a death that is essentially repeated later on down the line in Final Destination 4, which we'll get to that later. And yeah, I think her as a character, she is alright, but I think this death overall is actually way more iconic. I do think it is one of the more iconic deaths within the series itself. Again, more so to the fact that they even repeated it later on in Final Destination 4. It's a death that's actually referenced a lot throughout the entire franchise. Of course, Final Destination 2, many of the deaths, including Todd Wagner's death, are referenced in Final Destination 2, but even in the novels, this death is referenced. Again, it's repeated again in Final Destination 4. So this death is surprisingly integral to the entire fabric of Final Destination, if that makes sense, to the entire franchise. So because of that, I'm just going to put it in S tier. I think it is one of the more iconic deaths. And also from a production standpoint, there's this scene that goes immediately right after it, where she gets run over by the bus, cool, everybody's freaking out, and then for a minute straight afterwards, you have Claire and Alex. They're just drinking water, and I guess that scene specifically was inserted there because the real life audience was too freaked out by that death, so they needed them to calm down. So they had Claire and Alex drinking water for a straight minute afterwards. So yeah. All right, next up we have Valerie Luton, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I am not the biggest fan of this death. I feel it's way too cartoony, which is kind of funny because we have a bunch of other deaths here that I will say are on that level of cartoony. But and it is kind of weird to say this because this is a more fantasy horror type of genre, type of movie series. But I do find it to be just a touch too unrealistic, in my opinion, with the vodka just dripping through the computer and then exploding. Something about it has always just been too out there for me, too out there, a little bit too much for me, and because of that, I just never really liked it. So I'm just gonna put it here in D tier. I know that may be a bit controversial for some people, but that's how I truly feel. I've just never really liked this set. I've always found it too over the top. All right, next up we have Billy Hitchcock, and I'm gonna just put him here in A tier. I'll even say right above Todd. if I could put him above Toad, yeah. Part of it had to do with his character. I actually really do much enjoy his character, Sean William Scott. The actor, I thought he did a phenomenal job as Billy Hitchcock. And it kind of shows one of the rules of death where if the person before you, i.e. Carter, is skipped in death's design, then naturally, immediately right after, it's like immediately, like, without missing a beat, the next person in line will die, or he'll at least attempt to be killed, or they will be attempt to be killed. There's going to be a attempt of their life. Again, Final Destination 3 kind of plays a little bit with that, but still. But I feel just with that, it's pretty cool. And like I said, I do think, honestly, on a very low key note, I do think this is one of the more iconic deaths also in the series to go along with it. So there's that. So, and honestly, Billy Hitchcock, kind of sad he goes out, but he needs to go out. All right, next up we have Carter Horton, and I'll be honest, there is an inclination for me to just put this like in C tier because we don't actually see the death, if I'm being completely honest. But honestly, I think the character himself kind of carries the death, so I'm gonna put him in B tier. I think all the things surrounding his death, like all the signs, so to speak, and all the Rube Goldberg effects that are going in there that are about to kill Alex. I think that plays a large element as to why this death is a little bit more middle of the pack for me. Also, going along with it, again, this is basically an off-screen death. Yes, we hear what happens afterwards, both from Rory, because he was there, he witnesses this apparently, and even then we just see it fades to black and you kind of just assume what happens. But there is a part of me that kind of just wishes we would have seen him actually get whacked. So maybe a little bit demented, maybe a little bit like what are you thinking? But I'll be honest, that's kind of what I wanted. This is kind of a death that is kind of carried also by the actor, by the character themselves. I think the actor, Kurt Smith, he did a great job in the role for what he needed to do, and he was a very well written character. So this one was it's kind of sad he had to go, but he had to go. But still, kind of wish we would have seen the actual death. So yeah. Okay, Alex Browning. I'm just gonna put him here in D tier. Simply fact, I think it's one of the most disrespectful deaths we've had in the entire franchise. So in real life, Devon Sawa, there's a payment dispute, and because originally he was supposed to appear in Final Destination 2 alongside Claire, but there was some kind of payment dispute that was going on, and because of that, they're like, okay, cool, you don't want to return? We'll make sure you never return, and they gave him one of the most disrespectful deaths ever. An off-screen death, sorry. They gave him an off-screen death where he apparently just dies from a falling brick. I have to assume there's more going into that, to be honest with you. I have to assume there's something happened inside the house, similar to Evan Lewis, to honestly where it forced him to leave the house, or something happened where it forced him to leave the house, and the brick has eventually got him. But I always found this death very disrespectful, especially towards the actor, towards the character. And it's like, really, you guys just killed him out of petty for that reason. And I'm not saying they couldn't. I'm not saying, and that's something they've tried to do across the series in a few other occasions, such as with Kimberly and Tom, wherever they are. Actually, no, they never technically died, but officially they've never died, so that's why they're not here. But yeah, I mean, so they've tried that in the past, but with Kimberly and Tom, that was kind of a bonus features, is a canon type of situation, whereas no, this is 100% canon, and just the way they did it was very disrespectful, and also because of some of the production behind the scenes stuff that goes along with it. So I'm just gonna put that in D tier. Yeah, simple as that. Okay, next up we have the pilot up, and not gonna lie, this is my favorite disaster across the whole series. So I'm gonna just put that there at number one. I mean, it's it's the reason we're all scared of log trucks, and I mean, I'm down here in Miami, so I don't really have the quote unquote luxury of driving behind a log truck and being scared shitless afterwards. But there you go. We still have car pileups, we still have car crashes. So I do think this is probably the best made disaster across the board. It's definitely the most scariest one across the board. So yeah, I'm gonna have it there at number two. All right, next up, Evan Lewis, and I'm just gonna bump him up right there in S tier. I'm gonna put him just under Terry Chaney. I still think the suddenness of Terry Chaney's death is a little bit more impactful than Evan Lewis's more drawn out death, especially with everything that's going on. But I do think Evan Lewis's death and just the setup for it was just great. It is one of my favorite deaths, which is it's a year on S tier. So yeah, and then the ladder just going through his eye. I mean, I do think that's iconic. Again, when it comes to the first deaths in the movie, they have to pack a punch. And these two, right off the bat, they really do pack a punch. Okay, next up, we have Tim Carpenter. And here's the thing with Tim. I am not the biggest fan of his character. A lot of it has to do with just production stuff that happened behind the scenes. Originally, he was supposed to be an 8-year-old boy, and the producers were like, no, that's too screwed up. Age him up. So they aged him up to be the 14, 15-year-old boy. And because of that, I don't think they ever truly rewrote the character to act like a 15-year-old boy. I think in a lot of respects, they still had him act like an 8-year-old boy. So his character has always read kind of weird to me, and his death, I'm not the biggest fan of his death. I actually think that I guess the quote unquote original concept for his death would have been better. And not that there was an original concept. I just think that he died on the dentist chair, suffocating on that rubber fish. I think that would have been better. If I'm being honest, it would have been maybe not as impactful. I will say this: his death is kind of a shock, but it's one that I just kind of don't care. It kind of just passes by me. It's one of those things that what it does to the other characters, especially Nora, his mother, I think that's a lot more impactful than the death itself. But I'll just put that in C tier. It's one of those deaths I kind of just like, I'm whatever about, if I'm being honest. All right, next up we have Nora, and I'm gonna put this one straight up there in A tier. I don't think it's the best. I don't think it's like I think it's like about to be S tier in my opinion. There's a part of me that wants to say, oh, it's about to be S tier, but not really. Part of it also has to do that I do think just their deaths are a touch bit more iconic than Nora's death, to be honest with you. But despite that, I do think she's a likable character. I do like her character a lot more than her son, to be honest with you. So I do think she's a likable character, and her trying to escape and almost having these suicidal ideations, I guess. Not to that extreme, but like her be like, yes, I'm okay with dying if that's what happens. But then her at the same time pleading for like, hey, don't kill me, I don't want to go now. I do think that is very effective. I do think that packs the proper punch, and then her just being decapitated on that by that elevator. Eugene and I guess the man with hooks just freaking out as to what's going on right there. The shot of just the decapitated head is just I think all that's just great practical effects. And even afterwards, when Kat and Claire come back into the apartment and they're just covered in her blood, and they're like, "Yo, can we figure this out like now, please?" I just always find it hilarious. So I'm just gonna put her in A tier. Next up, we have Kat, and I do think that the setup for her death is a little bit all over the place. If I'm being honest with you, it's a little bit random in terms of the setup. So it's one of those things that sometimes don't really know how to feel about her death. But I think overall it's still a well done death. Sometimes I don't know how to feel about her death just because I think it's a bit too precise. It kind of falls into the same trap of Valerie's, but not to the same extent. I think where it's like everything's just a touch bit too extravagant for it to have turned out like that. The only difference is that her death, Valerie's death, I just found it to be way too extravagant. Where it's in the large scale, whereas I found her death to be extravagant in small scale, like just with the details itself, whereas it was like the whole scene. So like her just like that pipe being exactly where it needs to be. But granted, that's that. He maneuvers everything to be where it needs to be so that these people can properly die. Also, her character's not that it's a nothing character, I just find her to be a little bit one note sometimes. But overall I still think it's a pretty cool death. And honestly the image of just that spike, that pipe going through her head, and after the airbag decompresses is iconic in my opinion. It's like fantastic. It's just like very horrific, and it does pack a punch. Next up, we have Rory Peters, and I'm not gonna lie, Rory low-key is one of my favorite characters across the franchise. I don't know, just the way Jonathan Cherry portrays him is just fantastic. I really love the way he portrays him. And honestly, I would say his death is also a little bit goofy. It kind of has the same thing with Cat, where it's like, oh, everything just fits it a little bit too precisely. But again, that's design, so it has to fit precisely. But either way, if you look at the behind the scenes of how they did his death, I think it looks pretty cool. The effects are pretty cool. A little bit CGI, but overall, effects look pretty cool. And I was kind of sad to see him go. So yeah, so I'm just gonna put him in S tier right here. I still think that Evans is a bit better. Like just the setup for Evans' death is a bit better than Rory's, and Terry's is still more iconic than that. So I'm just gonna have him there in third place so far in S tier. All right, next up we have Eugene and Claire. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't like these deaths. I'm just gonna put them here in D tier. I still think they're a little bit. I still think that Alex is the worst death. They die at the same time, so I'm gonna put them there. I find this death disrespectful for Claire, and then Eugene just kind of happens to be there as well. It's one of those things. The setup for his death also kind of makes no sense to me, where he's trapped in his hospital room, and I guess the oxygen fills the room, or like the oxygen tank like busts, or like the pipe or the hose for the oxygen tank like busts or whatever. And then so for whatever reason, when the door opens, that causes an explosion, and it's because like the EKG machine or whatever machine that he's hooked up to, like it's like a little bit loose. Like the setup for the death just has never made sense to me, if I'm being honest. So and it never made sense to like, oh, why did the room explode? Like yes, I understand there's a spark, but like what caused that spark? Is it because of the too much oxygen? Like the setup for it has just never made sense to me. And for her, Claire, again, she's a legacy character. I just feel like the way they screw out, it's very disrespectful. Like if she was gonna die, I feel like she should have died one by herself, not with somebody else. I think she should have died by herself, and it should have been with a setup that makes a lot more sense. And it should have been something that she was like actively trying to avoid, and then she got sideswiped or side killed, I guess, by something that she just didn't expect. Which I guess to a certain extent that does count, but like I don't know. I've never liked the setup. I've never liked the deaths. I find that very disrespectful, specifically for Claire. Um, Eugene, it also kind of leaves Eugene kind of out there. It kind of leaves Eugene out there to dry in a sense too, because like I do think he's a good character, and this is also kind of he goes out like I don't know. I just never like these deaths. All right, next up we have Brian Gibbons, and I'm just gonna stick him here in C tier. I think Tim's death is better than Brian's. Although I do like the final shot where his burnt up, cooked up arm just lands in front of his mom and she just screams. I mean, the thing with this is the fact that like we don't really get any setup for this. We just hear that, oh yeah, Rory saved this kid from dying, that day, and now he's on death's list or on a list of death, which with just him for whatever reason. And this is when he decides to go out. So like the setup for it is like non-existent because we didn't really know he was gonna die per se, and we didn't really see any of the signs per se. But he died. Sure, why not? The last shot again with his arm being cooked there right in front of his mom, pretty funny. Next up, we have the roller coaster disaster, and I'm not gonna lie, this is actually my least favorite disaster in the series. So yeah, one of the few things that Final Destination 4 actually does right, because this is Final Destination 3. So yeah, Final Destination 4 is at least gonna be higher than the roller coaster. I just feel like the roller coaster disaster is a little bit too quaint compared to the rest of the disasters that we get, compared to the subway, the speedway disaster, the bridge collapse, Flight 180, the pileup, the mall explosion. I just find it to be a way too small scale, and I'm not saying that they can't do small scale. I'm not saying that, but I do kind of like the spectacle of it all, and the roller coaster just doesn't have the spectacle of it all. Okay, next up we have Ashlyn and Ashley, and I'm just gonna put them here on S tier. Are they better than Rory? I would say they're better. I would say they're better than Rory. Their setup is a lot better than Rory's setup. But the death, so I'll put them right there. I still think Evan Lewis's is better. I do think his setup is better for the death, and again, first deaths in the movie, first deaths in the movie. Again, that trend, like they actually wait, this wasn't first death this year, but you know what I mean. First death. They're still here in the top ones. Overall, I do think this is one of the more iconic deaths across the series. Especially with the match cut of the tanning beds being match cut immediately to the coffins. It's just hysterical. That's when back in Final Destination 3, that's when they really started leaning into the comedy aspects of the series, which then they went full ridiculous with in Final Destination 4. Again, iconic deaths, and it really packs a punch, and it's very comedic, especially with that match cut at the end. Frankie Cheeks. And I'm just going to put him here in B tier. I'm going to put him right there in B tier, right above Carter, just because we actually see his death. We actually see Frankie Cheeks' death. And again, he's kind of a nothing character. He's, with his character, a little bit with their character, but more so with his character, Frankie. We do see this trend now where, with his character, where the characters are a bit more cartoony. They're a bit more one note. We definitely see this with Frankie. I'll say the same thing with Lewis. We see that with both of them. And I guess Perry by default, but that's a whole different conversation. But with like Frankie and Lewis, we definitely get to see that they're a bit one more note compared to some of the other characters we've had earlier in the series. But because of that, we also get to enjoy his death just a little bit more. I do think the setup for it is a little bit ridiculous. I do think kind of veers into that Valerie Luden section side of it, where it's like it doesn't make complete sense. It makes just enough sense for it to be palatable and tolerable, but I do think the setup could have been just a touch bit better. Wish had his death been, I guess, made or done in a different way. I do like it more when the character tries to escape their fate and ultimately dies, as opposed to them just like it just happening to them. Again, that's kind of my problem with his death and also Lewis's death to a certain extent. So like, I'm just gonna have him there, and I mean, we saw the effects for his death are pretty gnarly. They're pretty cool, so I do like that too. So yeah, next up we have Luis Romero, and I'm just gonna put him here in C tier. Yeah, I would say he's better than Tim and Brian. Again, these characters I don't particularly care for. I mean, he's kind of like a third-rate character who just he's like an extra who just they decided to give lines to at the end, and then they gave him an extra scene at the end. So go figure. The only, again, similar to Frankie, he's kind of a cartoon. He does kind of veer into that one noteness. He also doesn't really avoid his death. Again, similar to Frankie, he just doesn't avoid it. The only reason I would have his death higher than Lewis's, the only reason I have him in B tier, and him in C tiers because I do like the practical effects behind him. Whereas with Lewis's death, they did have practical effects applied to it, but they just drenched it in the CGI bloodfest, which I think really lowers the quality of death. I mean, practical is always better. That's really what it comes down to. Practical is always better. All right, next up we have Erin Omer. And Erin, I'm just going to put here in B tier. I do think the effects for her death are pretty cool. I think the setup is actually really good for her death, even though it's kind of a red herring because it really applies more to Ian's death or possible death at that time than it does to Erin. But regardless, I do like it. Again, unlike Lewis's, for example, Frankie's and Erin's death, and I guess actually maybe this one doesn't count in this case, but I do prefer the fact that they are using practical effects. I mean, in this case, I think they kind of use CGI, you know what I mean? But it was actually well done. Whereas here it wasn't well done. So that's kind of my one criteria, I guess. You know, are the effects well done? Which I think should always be a thing in any horror movie. Are the effects well done and are they passable, whether they be visual or special effects? And yeah, I mean, I just nails going through her are great. I just do wish we could have cared a bit more for this character. I don't think it's not that she's one note, but I think she kind of has the same problem as Terry, where she's kind of just this person's girlfriend. And yes, they do develop them a little bit, but it's not enough to have passed the shadow of their boyfriend, if that makes sense. Okay, next up we have Perry Malinowski. I'm just gonna put this here, like right there. Yeah, I mean she's the definition of a nothing character. Even compared to the characters in Final Destination 4, she is a nothing character. She literally has no lines in the entire in the movie. She has no lines. She has no speaking lines at all. She's a character who quite literally meant to be forgotten. So yeah, and her death is honestly seems like a bit of an afterthought at the end of everything else. So I get, I don't like it. So I kind of wish she would do something. I kind of just wish her character was something essentially. And I mean, realistically, I guess technically she should be in C tier because it kind of just comes and goes. But like I just don't care for the characters. So like do I like her death better than Claire and Eugene's? I mean, again, it's the definition of a death that just kind of happens. I find their death very disrespectful, whereas hers is kind of like a whatever death. There's like barely any setup to it either. So like again, it just happens. I kind of similar to Brian, I guess. I guess it's similar in that way to Brian, where it just kind of happens. But the thing with Brian is like his is actually comedic. It has like a punch to it, whereas I will say her death, it does actually is kind of a shocker sometimes in the sense that like, oh, it happens and it happens so, but the thing is it happens so quick that the feeling of like, oh my gosh, kind of goes away just as quickly. Next up we have Ian McKinley, and Ian's death has always been just a little bit weird to me, mostly because of some of the theories behind him, his character, and his death. So I'm just gonna put him here at C tier, above Lewis. Yeah, above Lewis. So like there's a lot of theories revolving his death or when he was supposed to die. A lot of people said that even though he dropped from the roller coaster, he actually didn't die instantaneously. He actually bled out and all this stuff. And realistically, he was supposed to die after Kevin, but before Christy. And there's a bunch of other fan theories in regards to his death, or if he skipped the list, or if he didn't skip the list, or a bunch of stuff like that you could read upon. Reading those fan theories and whatever, for me, has always kind of like put a weird damper on him as a character and his death specifically. Just having those discussions, I've always found it to be like kind of dumb and like not necessary, but people just love having those discussions. I'm not sure if they love having those discussions anymore, but I remember back in the day, like 10 years ago, they really loved having those discussions. All right, next up we have Subway Crash, and I'm going to put this right here over the roller coaster. I think the Subway Crash kind of has the same problems as roller coaster, where it's not that big of a spectacle. However, it's still a bigger spectacle than the roller coaster, so I'm gonna put it there. I guess technically it does feature the deaths of Kevin and the Julie and Wendy, so I guess by that logic, where would I put it? I guess I'd put it in B tier just because of the twist, but I'm gonna just leave this because of disaster, and I'm gonna have it here, right there, in third place, I guess, for now. Speaking of which, the Speedway. I'm gonna put the Speedway actually above the Subway too, because it is a spectacle. So yeah, the one thing that Final Destination 4 does better in any regard than any of these other movies, I guess, is the disaster. Now, funny enough, people don't really like this disaster that much. I'll be honest, I kind of get it. People don't like this movie to begin with in general. So because of that, I think the byproduct of that is that the disaster itself won't be liked that much. But one common complaint I've heard about this disaster, and it's not that I don't get it. Like, I definitely see it, and I understand why people have this complaint. But it's one of those things I kind of just don't care in this regard, is the fact that people say, oh, this is too over the top, this is too cartoony, which I personally just never really cared, because at the end of the day, I'm more concerned about the individual deaths than the disaster death, because at the end of the day, we know those aren't going to happen, so to speak. So it kind of doesn't matter to a certain, at least in my opinion, to a certain degree. Like, it's fun to watch. And I'll be honest, like, the deaths and the premonitions were pretty decent, with Andy getting that stick right through his mouth, for example. But I think the problem also with this disaster, and just to further extent the rest of the movie, the rest of these deaths here, is the fact that they relied way too much on CGI. So I think that is kind of a downer. Hey, at least the characters were able to actually move around, unlike these two. All right, next up we have Carter Daniels, and here I'm gonna put him in B tier. His death in B tier. I do think it's better than Cat's, just because it is comedic, just for that one reason. So, and by extension, better than Aaron's. So yeah, I don't think it's as good as Carter's technically unseen death, but yeah, I do like his death in the sense that, well, he's a racist character, so sure, let's get rid of the racist right off the bat. Why not? He's quite literally whistling Dixie chants or whatever, Dixie songs. So Dixie tunes, that's the word. So it's better for him to die at the end of the day, and I guess in that regard. And I just find it to be comedic. That kind of is the point of it being comedic. I mean, you literally have "Why Can't We Be Friends?" That song by War, blasting on the radio, and then his decapitated head just explodes right in front of George's house. Like, it's comedic. I've always found it funny. I will say this. Though, it doesn't pack as much of a punch that I remembered, because I am rewatching the movies right now. And I actually remember, maybe when I was younger, I liked his death a little bit more. But like, looking back at it, I just want to say that I just felt like his death used to pack a way bigger punch than it does now. Like, when I was younger, I felt like I was a lot more surprised, but now I'm not anymore. So I don't know. Maybe I'd move him down under Cat, maybe under Aaron too. Yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense now. Now that I'm looking at it, because of that lack of punch, so to speak. I'll move him under Cat and Aaron. I think his death is still better than Ian's, just because it's a bit more clear, so I'll say that much. Next up, we have Samantha. It's one of those things that originally I would have had this death a little bit higher, honestly, maybe bordering on A to B tier, but it's one of those things where I like the setup for her death more than I like her actual death, because she's in this beauty salon, hair salon, and there's so many things that could kill her, and then it's kind of random that this guy on a lawnmower has a rock, like, stuck in the lawnmowing machine, and that's what kills her. It's like, you have this whole setup with a bunch of, with like the scissors and the ceiling fan and the beauty spray and all this, and you kill her with something that's like kind of out of reach. Also, kind of, personally, I prefer, again, when the characters try to escape their death in some capacity. Carter Daniels kind of kind of escapes his death. I mean, he kind of just like stands there, like wiggling his fist, like, "Hey, where's my car going?" before panicking. So there's that. So even that, I would say, just kind of puts it above hers. I think the setup for her death is a lot better than his, but his actual death is a lot more better than hers. So I guess, I don't know, I'll put him here. It makes a lot more sense still than Ian. I'll say that much. I just, the setup for Ian's death, like, makes no sense for me. That's one thing. Next up, we have Andy, and again, similar to the other two Final Destination 4 deaths, the setup is just a little bit off, and his death is ruined by the CGI. I mean, what do you want me to say? The one thing with his death that puts it a little bit better is the fact that we actually kind of get a character out of this guy, unlike generic racist and generic MILF. I mean, that's quite literally how she's credited in the movie, Samantha slash MILF. He's given a little bit more sympathy, so to speak, or a little bit more of a character development. Granted, he's only like in 2 scenes. I've always been curious to see, like, is there ever actually a fence that can do that? Because if you guys remember, his death revolves getting like a gas canister or whatever it is, some kind of canister launched into him, and then he just kind of backs up into a fence. And I'm just thinking, like, every single fence I've seen is like a regular chain link fence. Like, what kind of fence have you seen that is like able to slice people? So that's the one thing I've always found kind of random. But I don't know. Maybe I put him over Carter just because, like, he's kind of a character. But the setup, even then, the setup for his death is kind of like mediocre. Like, I would say that she has the best setup. Like, if you're talking about just the setups, she has the best setup, whereas he has maybe the worst. But like, or maybe I put him here just to split the difference between setup and actual death. Yeah, sure, whatever. Doesn't really matter. All right, next up we have Hunt Wynorski, and I'm just gonna put this here at the very top of A. At the very top of A, if it actually allows me, right there at the very top of A. So yeah, I don't think he's as good as S, just for the simple fact that I don't really care for his character. And again, his death surprisingly doesn't pack that much of a punch. So that's, for me, that's the one thing. Like, I want to be shocked. I want to be horrified by these deaths. And in Final Destination 4, I'm not really horrified by them, to be honest with you. Like, I mean, despite the criticism I just gave about Samantha's, like hers does kind of shock me just a little bit, but like I also kind of don't care. Whereas again, I think again the setup for his death is honestly what carries the death overall. And that's what carries it because he's at the bottom of the ocean, not ocean. He's at the bottom of the pool, sucked by his ass, quite literally sucked by his ass. His intestines are literally coming out of his ass, and he can't really scream. He's like half drowning. He's trying to like get out of this situation, and I don't know what kind of suction that drain has, to be honest with you, to still hold him ass down right there, but still. And again, he can't really talk. He can't really communicate. He's like trying to find a way to get out. And like honestly, the psychological horror, I would say, out of any deaths here, this probably has the best psychological horror element to it. I'm trying to think. Maybe Nora's, maybe Todd's has some psychological horror to it. Maybe the Ashes, but like his is drawn out and psychologically horrifying because he doesn't know if he's gonna drown or if he's gonna have his intestines sucked out of him. So I think for that as well, for that element of it as well, I think it's kind of a good death for a very lackluster character in my opinion. Next up, we have Jonathan Groves, and I'm just gonna put this here in D tier. In D tier, I'll put him over Perry. I guess I like the spectacle a little bit more than Valerie's than Jonathan's. I know I criticized the crap out of the spectacle a little bit, but still, at least there's something to watch. Unlike Jonathan's, something I saw a video one very recently. Now that because I'm watching a bunch of Final Destination videos now that Bloodlines is about to come out, and they pointed out something that yes, that's one of the reasons I don't really care for this death at all. But I never really realized it. But it's because his death really isn't an accident per se. A lot of these other deaths, especially in Final Four, like they're freak accidents. You know, like who's able to get dragged by their truck? You know, who's able to get stuck to the suction drain, the drain, you know, of a pool or whatever. You know, who gets launched, whatever. Granted, a bathtub falls on him, but first off, just the mechanics of it kind of make no sense because the water starts dripping right over his bed, yet the bathtub falls like on the other side of the room, and he still dies. So there's that. And, you know, I guess the logic is that he gets crushed by the bathtub or drowns by the bathtub, or doesn't really matter. But it's also one of those things like it's not really an accident. Really, it's just like human incompetence, if that makes sense. Like it's one of those things that the guy who is filling the bathtub, the nurse, he kind of just leaves, and his patient's like, wait, why are you leaving? You need to shut off the bathtub. Hey, the bathtub is still running. Hey, and it's just kind of weird. And also the placement of his death makes no sense. So here's one thing. I guess I can mention this here with Jonathan's death. Every single movie plays around with this one idea, and that's that the seating or the location of where the survivors are, like the actual like can affect the order. So like that's why in the first movie, Alex thought he was gonna die last, or sorry, right before Claire, but then you realized that oh wait, I never actually switched seats, so realistically I'm gonna die last. Now granted that explanation doesn't make too much sense, but besides the point, you know, Final Destination 2, you have the whole thing of them going in reverse order. In Final Destination 3, you have the mystery of who are those two girls right in front of Ian and Aaron, and then again the conspiracy theories with Ian. You know, so then we get something like this. We're like, oh, there's a person who actually was in the disaster. They weren't in the disaster, but they still survived. And logically, they survived. So why aren't they dying in their place? In the premonition, he dies right before Hunt and Janet. He dies before these two. Yet in real life, he dies after Hunt because Janet was saved. So he dies after Hunt, and that's never really made sense to me. And like like I'd be like, just have him die when he was supposed to die. He got saved, cool. I don't see why he needs to like die after this. Like it's one of those things like okay, if he was saved, then just have him be at the end of the list, and not just switch places with Hunt and Janet. Like that kind of made no sense to me. It still doesn't make sense to me. And again, just the mechanic of his death, it's just dumb. Next up, we have George Lanter, and I am gonna put that death here in D tier as well. I'm actually gonna put it in the top of D tier just because I mean, this is basically Terry Cheney's death. That's really it. It's a carbon copy of Terry Cheney's death. Back in Final Destination 1, this death packed a punch. Now, in Final Destination 4, it's honestly kind of just worn out. Despite the fact that this is the second time we've seen a death like this, it's still just very worn out. In all fairness, just the way it's handled in Final Destination 4 isn't that good either. Again, it kind of just happens. The lack of spectacle in this case is what puts it over Valerie's death. And also because of the fact that like George is a likable character, he's probably the most likable character in Final Destination 4. Alright, next up, the Mall Premonition. So, I have a lot of issues with the Mall Premonition because if I am being completely honest, I think as a disaster in and of itself, this is actually the best one. I would put this over the pile up. No joke. I would put the Mall Disaster over the pile up. Thing is that it never actually happens. It's actually prevented. And there's a lot of questions that kind of come with that because okay, that means you prevent a premonition. So it's because of that. And granted, we're at the end of the movie, so it's not like we can follow up on this either way. Granted, I'll give you that, but it's one of those things like you still had like a few more scenes after this. Like maybe there could have been signs of like whatever this premonition was supposed to be. Now that it was prevented, like the effects of it afterwards. So like because of that, this premonition has always kind of read weird to me. The placement of it has always been weird because we've never seen even across the entire franchise that once a premonition is had, it's not like it's not going to happen. Like the closest thing we get to a situation with this is in one of the short stories where there's a gas station explosion where this guy he removes himself from his family and he doesn't and he kind of like moves away from his family to protect them. And he's gonna meet with his family, and then he has a premonition of that the gas station that they're going to meet up explodes, and he does something in that thing as well to possibly prevent it. And that is a keyword there, possibly prevent it. But we don't really see what happens because the story ends like the day before the premonition is supposed to happen. So we don't really see the after effects of that. And again, the novels and the comic books are kind of like detached from the movies itself. That's the other thing with it. So like because of that, like I just don't really know what to make of this premonition sometimes. So because of that, I'm just gonna put it here right there in the middle. I do think it's better than the Speedway, and I do like the spectacle of it, but like what the implications are for the series at large, it's just like I kind of don't care for it. All right, next up we have Janet, Lori, and Nick, and they all die at the same time, and I think their deaths are kind of whatever as well. I will put them. Should I put them over Brian or not? It doesn't really matter. I'll put them over Brian. They all die at the same time. It doesn't really matter what this order is right now, but like it's one of those things for this being our leads of the film, like they don't really get that iconic of a death, if I'm being honest. I mean, like Wendy, her sister, and Kevin, like they get the subway's death. So like I would say that's a pretty cool twist. We'll get to Final Destination 5 once we get to Final Destination 5, for example. But like I guess it's one of those things like when they kill off the visionaries, when they kill off the main characters, they never really know how to kill them off in a proper way. I mean, of course, we have these two here. Yeah, I guess it's it's one of those things. I kind of wish they would have shown the actual death instead of like the CGI skeleton stuff that they were doing throughout that whole movie, like they did in the intro of the movie. I guess I would have liked to see them actually die instead of the CGI mess that we saw. But like it doesn't really matter. Like these characters are very much unlikable. That's the other thing. Like I don't know. Like I think Janet is like one of the worst characters just across the series. So there's that too. So it doesn't really matter. These are not the characters. I guess I don't know. Maybe I put Brian over them just because I really don't care for these characters and because we actually see the deaths instead of the CGI skeleton X-ray vision stuff that we got from them. Also, their death also has like no setup too. That's the other thing. Their death has like no setup to it. I guess it has a little bit more setup than Brian. So sure. Yeah, let's go with that. It doesn't really matter. Final Destination 4 sucks. I think we all know that. All right, next up, we have the bridge collapse, and I'm just going to put this here at number 2. I think it is right after the highway. I do think it's the best disaster we've had in the series. So yeah, I think by default, that is my disasters. Me ranking the disasters. I have the pile up, the bridge collapse, Flight 180, the mall premonition, McKinley Speedway, the subway, and the roller coaster. There's a ranking for all disasters. So yeah, and if I had to put this on like S, A, B, C, D tier, I'd put A tier. No, sorry, I'd put S tier for these two, A tier, B tier, C, C, D. So just so you guys get the idea. All right, back to your regularly scheduled program. Let me put this back here. Okay, back to the final deaths. Okay, we have Candace Hopper, and honestly, she is my favorite death across the entire series. It's actually the only death in this series I legitimately cannot watch. I could see Terry being ran over by a bus any day. I could see the Ashes being burnt to ashes. I could see Evan getting a ladder to their face. I could see Huds being sucked ass first through a drain. I could see Frankie getting his head chopped into bits by a motor. Her being stabbed by a spike, a pipe to the head. Rory getting bisected, trisected, whatever. Rock through her eye. It doesn't matter. Her death. her death, I just cannot watch. The setup for it is just incredible. I think next to Evan's death, I want to say probably the best setup across any of these deaths. I think it's just top tier best setup. I cannot watch this death at all. This is the one that haunts me no matter what. Like even thinking about it, I just start cringing and like wanting to turn away. It's like the one death that makes me want to turn away. It's one of the few scenes in any movie period that makes me want to turn away. I just cannot see this stuff. It makes me it visibly disgusts me just because of how it's done and just like how the body contorts at the end. It's just like mind boggling. I just cannot watch it. So because of that alone, it has to be S tier. Because of the fact that I cannot watch it, it's my favorite one. All right, next up we have Isaac Palmer, and I'm just gonna put him here in A tier. I do think the setup for his death is really good. Also, him being kind of a sexist character, it kind of helps in us wanting him to die. To be honest with you, like yes, I want this piece of trash to die. I don't think his death is as memorable as Nora's. Also, I don't think he's as good of a character as Nora. I think honestly he's one of the worst characters. I think he's a well written character, but like he's like one of those characters that you love to hate type of thing. And I love to hate this character because he's kind of a creep. He's kind of sexist. And he's just perving across everything, and he's kind of like an opportunist. Like he's literally going through his dead coworkers' stuff to like try to get stuff, and I just don't like the character in that regard. Again, well written, and PJ Burns, the actor, I think he does a great job in that role. But like I don't like the character, so I can't wait for you to die. And my gosh, you die in just spectacular fashion. Really like that death. Next up, Olivia Castle. Honestly, I'll put her in A tier as well. I do like the setup for her death. I think Isaac's death is a bit more impactful, and I do like him more. It's one of those things where I like the setup for his death, and I like his death itself. Whereas for her, I just like the setup of her death. I think her death is a little bit meh, if I'm being honest. It doesn't pack that big of a punch. It is shocking, but it's not as shocking as him getting crushed with the Buddha statue. You know what I mean? However, I do think that the image of her eye rolling out and then eye getting ran over by like a truck is pretty funny. So you kind of do bring some of those dark comedic elements that you did see back in Final Destination 3 and 4 back into the fold, and actually done properly this time. Again, a lot of this is towards Final Destination 4. Just gonna say that much. But yeah, overall, that's where I'm gonna have it at number A. Number A, letter A, rank A. There we go. All right, next up we have Roy Carson, and this one I'm gonna put here in B tier. Now, where in B tier do I want to put this here? I'll put you over. I'll put you out over the Final Destination 4 crew right there. The reason I'm having him in B tier is like, if I'm being honest, like the setup for his death kind of doesn't matter. It's more so what his death signifies in terms of the entire franchise. Because at this point, we're getting the idea of if you kill somebody, you get the rest of their days. And Nathan is Nathan here? I just realized Nathan is not here. Oh wait, I guess he's in this bunch, which we'll get to later. Nathan, I guess we're signifying Sam right here for Nathan. Nathan pushes him off the ledge, and he gets a literal hook through his skull. So I think that image in and of itself is pretty cool. Also, the fact that they have a character called Roy at a paper company. The factory section of the paper company is a little bit on the nose, if you catch my drift. But besides the point, but like again, it's more so what his death signifies in terms of the larger Final Destination brand, Final Destination franchise. Like, oh, this is what we're doing. If we can kill somebody, we get their life. Oh, game time. We should definitely be doing this. So I think just for that alone, it's pretty cool. And honestly, the way his death looks, again, that hook through his head, honestly, very well done. Okay, next up we have Dennis Latman, and I'm just going to put him here in C tier. I'll say it's over Lewis's death. Maybe I'll put it over Ian. Again, the setup for Ian's death kind of makes no sense. But yeah, it's one of those things that kind of just happens. It kind of has the Billy Hitchcock effect, where the person before him kind of gets skipped, or I guess skipped because of murder. And then because of that, this death is a bit of an afterthought. Again, similar to Perry. Where's Perry? In that sense, similar to Perry. It's a bit of an afterthought. And the only difference is that I think the effects for his death with that wrench right there through his head is actually very well done. So I'll put him in C tier. I don't think it's there at B tier level, to be honest with you, because I think there is no setup, unlike them, who actually did kind of get some setup for their death. He didn't get a setup for his death, so it kind of just doesn't matter. So yeah, and my computer is like what 15% right now, so we should be finishing this video pretty fast, so I can get back to charging this thing. So yeah, next up we have Agent Block. Jesus Christ, I can't say that name. Agent Block. And I mean, here's the thing. This is a gun death. I think this is the only gun death in the entire franchise. The only time anybody gets shot. I mean, I guess by technicality, she gets shot through the eye with with a rock, but you know what I mean, with a gun. Yeah, I mean, granted, the whole subplot with Agent Block in Final Destination 5 kind of goes nowhere if you ask me. It's kind of like it's very much there, and you kind of don't really see why it's there. And if I'm being honest, I still don't really understand why it's there. It's there, and it's not really utilized to the best of its ability. And I would say the same thing for Final Destination 1, where it's not utilized to the best of its ability, but I think it's used better in Final Destination 1 than it is in Final Destination 5. I'll say that much. But as for this as a character, I mean, he's kind of a whatever character, and his character and his death specifically are used again in the same vein as Roy, where this character is killed by somebody else, and now they're taking the rest of their life. So it's one of those things I really don't know how to feel about it. I'm inclined to put it in like C or D tier. I'm just thinking, I'll say it's definitely better than Disrespectful Ass. I mean, her death doesn't matter. Uh, it's better than I guess it's better than Val's. It's better than George's. I'll say it's better than George's. It's better than Brian's. And I'll say it's better than these. I'll put it here. I think Tim's is maybe better. Yeah, yeah. Tim's maybe better. It's weird because I would say I would say he has a better death than Lewis, but I don't think he has a better death than Tim. However, I think Lewis's death is better than Tim's. I'll say, I don't know, maybe I split the difference and I just put them here. Sure, whatever. Doesn't really matter. That doesn't seem right. Maybe I put Tim over Lewis. Maybe I'll put Tim over Lewis just because of the setup. Then Tim over Ian. Actually, maybe I put Tim at the top of C. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. There we go. So that's what I have it now. Yeah, I like that actually. I like that. That makes sense. Tim over Sam or these? I don't know. Maybe I'll just move Tim up here to be honest with you. Am I really gonna move up Tim that much? I don't know. I mean, his death, him as a character is kind of weird. His death is kind of weird. Again, I like this. I like the setup of his death more than his actual death. Screw it. I'll just leave Tim there at B. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I just have these characters way too high. Maybe that's the thing too. Screw it. I'll leave him there. I don't think he's as good as Aaron, and I like Roy's death a bit more. So yeah, let's go with that. All right, Peter. And honestly, not gonna lie, I do kind of question how I feel about Peter's death sometimes because he does go that whole killer mode, psycho killer mode. No, psycho mode, sickle mode. That's the Travis Scott song, sickle mode. Whatever. But he does kind of go on that whole psycho killer mode towards the end of the movie, and it's one of those things where I don't blame him for going that route. And I don't blame the movie and the franchise itself for exploring that route. And it's not that that's a bad route to take either. I'm not saying to actually commend them for going that route. But I honestly feel like his death should have meant a bit more. And that's the one thing with me. I actually felt like his death should have meant a bit more in terms of the ending and what it meant for the series. And that's kind of my one problem with it. I just kind of wish his death would have meant more. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of wish his death would have been a bit more showy. I think his death should have been bigger in a sense. I kind of don't like the fact that his death is very much in the dark. I kind of wish, like, I don't know, even if the kitchen was on so we could see the actual practical effects of his death, it would have been actually a lot better. That's kind of the one thing with me for his death. I kind of wish it was a lot more than it was actually given. That's what it comes down to. I would say he has a better death than I like the setup. I'll say over Todd, over Billy, over I can't go as Hunt. I don't know if can I go as high as Billy. I think I go as I think I'll put him over Billy, but I don't think I go over Hunt. I'll say that much. I don't think I can go over Hunt. And last but not least, this is technically the trifecta of Sam, Molly, and Nate. I just don't know why they did it like this. All right, so I added these pictures properly because I don't know why they just did it like this. Because realistically, they have separate deaths. And yeah, so I mean, this is still technically Flight 180, so I'm just gonna put it here. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's Flight 180 right there. I mean, for the twist of it being Flight 180 in terms of Sam and Molly, because I do have different opinions on their deaths. For it being Sam and Molly, I think that's a brilliant idea for me. So I'm gonna put that here in S tier. I would honestly have it. I think it's better than Rory's. I do think it's right there. I still think Candace's death is like the top tier. I think that for that. The one thing is that I do like Sam's character a lot more than I like Molly's. I think Molly, in a lot of sense, is kind of just there as a character, whereas Sam is very active in it in the movie. He's very active in trying to figure out what's going on. I don't know. I'm also looking at this and do I like it better than Terry? Do I like it better than Evan Lewis's? I do like, again, I think just because of twist, I'll put it over Evan, but like for her being the second death. Again, a lot of people forget this guy dies, but for her being like probably the most iconic death in the series, bar none. I'll put that over them. Also, I like the fact that he dies in the same exact way that Alex would have died in the premonition. So there is that too, and she kind of gets thrown out the window or thrown out the side of the plane. So I mean, just for that horror element as well, I think to a certain extent it has the same elements as Hunt, where it is a bit psychologically scarring because of what's going on. So I do think it does give you that added bonus of that. And as for Nathan Sears, I'm actually gonna put him in A tier. I think his death is really well done for the reveal that it is. I'll put him at the end of A tier, however. Again, it's that revelation that this guy was gonna die regardless. Like this guy was gonna die soon from like a brain aneurysm. So like realistically, Nathan, he didn't really have that much time to live regardless. And the fact that he dies as a offshoot of Flight 180 is kind of hysterical in that sense. The one thing too is like I just kind of wish his character was a bit more active in the role in the movie. Again, he's that type of character where like he allows the movie, or he allows the events of the film to revolve around him versus him actually having an effect on the film. And even when he killed Roy, it's one of those things like, yes, he had an effect on the film, so to speak. He had an effect on the story, but it's one of those things like he kind of not backtracked, but it's like it's not. He was kind of pushed into that, or I guess he pushed it into it, so to speak. But yeah, that's the one thing. But overall, that revelation was pretty cool, and yeah. So yeah, that's where I'd rank all the deaths across the whole Final Destination series, including disasters. So here we have the pile up, the bridge collapse, Flight 180, the mall premonition, Speedway, McKinney Speedway, the subway, and the roller coaster. At S tier, we have Candace Hopper, we have Terry Cheney, we have Sam and Molly, Evan Lewis, Ashley and Ashlyn, Rory. And A tier, we have Hunt, Peter, Billy, Todd, Nora, Isaac, Olivia, Nate. In B tier, we have Frankie, Carter, Kat, Aaron, Roy, Tim, Carter, Andy, Samantha. In C tier, we have Dennis, Ian, Lewis, Jim, Janet, Lori, Nick, Brian. In D tier, we have George, Valerie, Jonathan, Perry, Eugene, Claire, and Alex. So yeah, those are how the deaths are ranked. Now, I did make a video similar to this about a year and a half ago in October 2023, where I said like my top 10 or top 15 favorite deaths. I do wonder how much of that is different from then and now, mostly because I know like in the top 15 I had like Roy, and because here, what would be my top 15 here? It'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So it'd be like right there. It would end at Frankie. Wow. And I know for sure I had Roy in there in the top 15. I feel like I had Aaron in the top 15, to be honest with you. So like I know these deaths, if I compare it to my top 15 list I did about a year and a half ago, I'm pretty sure a lot of these will be somewhat different, or maybe even different order. So yeah, I feel like probably my top 3 back then were like these 3 right off the bat. So I don't know, maybe switch them. Who cares? So yeah, that's what we have here. Maybe I think top 4 is probably like that, honestly. Probably top 4, and like top 5 was like technically like that, something like that. So yeah, but that's kind of the rankings that I have right now. And yeah, that's basically it for now. Comment down below on what your favorite deaths are across the franchise. And yeah, that's basically it for now. This is Daniel Mart signing off.